Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the CS2 external. In this video, I'll show how you can create an FOV-based trigger bot in C++. Now, before we start, let me actually give you a brief explanation how we're going to do it. Now, as you can see, I drew a little diagram of ourselves, our player, and an enemy. In the previous video, we found out in Cheat Engine the XYZ coordinates from for our entity classes. Doing some research, I realized that the offsets that we found in the last video were actually the head position offsets. Now, we can actually take this in our advantage and we can create a simple FOV-based trigger bot or aimbot if you really want. I also mentioned in the previous video that the XYZ coordinates represent the distance of an entity from the center of the map. In this case, we can visualize it like this. Now, the first step to creating this program, we first need to subtract our enemy's coordinates with our local player's coordinates to find the direct distance from our local player to the enemy. Now, after we find this, we can actually find the yaw and the pitch angle. Now, to find the yaw and the pitch, it's pretty simple. The yaw is the simplest out of them all. We are going to use arctan. Now, let me explain you why we're going to use arctan. As you can see, after I split this vector into two, into x and y, we can clearly see that over here, this is angle theta, and this forms a right angle triangle. In a right angle triangle, we have the opposite side, we have the adjacent side, and we have the hypotenuse. Now, we have x and y, but we don't have angle theta. And from the lessons at school of trigonometry, we know that the tangent of our unknown angle theta is equal with the ratio between the opposite y and the adjacent x. So, to reverse this on your calculator or even in C++, we have a function called arctan, which does the opposite. We just need to input our opposite and adjacent. It's going to give us the angle. Now, we found the yaw, but for the pitch is a little bit different. Let me actually show you what I mean. This is the x and the y, and this is the z. Now, we easily found the yaw because we have two planes on the same level, which is horizontal. Now, we only have one plane for our height, which is z. Now, to find a pitch, we first need to create another plane or another line, which would look like this, which would be in the middle. Now, to do that, we need to find the hypotenuse of x and y, which will create this line, basically. It won't, but I'll explain in a second. After we have the hypotenuse of x and y, we then need to use arctan of minus z and our hypotenuse over here, hypotenuse of x and y, to find the pitch. Now, let me explain a little bit why this is the case. If we draw a line here to the hypotenuse, we can then make another line over here to visualize this a little bit better. This is the z, and over here, this one is our x and y. This over here is our unknown angle theta, and like in this case, we're going to use arctan. But why minus z? Well, because the pitch in games, the higher you get, the more it's going to get more negative. When we look more further up, the lower the pitch gets. So that's why it's negative. Okay, so now let's get into the actual video. So now, as you can see, I already opened a cheat engine window over here. And we're going to be using the CL show pause command once again because it is very useful in it. And let's actually go here and let's start scanning for a float. Let's first start scanning for our pitch. Let's start scanning for our pitch. So let's go. I'm gonna first look at the floor and I'm gonna search for 89 because when you look at the floor, it's gonna be 89. Let's go. Now we're gonna be moving a little bit more, and now let's search for minus 15.11. Minus 15.11. Only 900 results. Now we're gonna search for unchanged values. We're gonna move a little bit. Actually, let's actually change our. Now we're gonna be searching for 90. Let me actually scroll down and check, take a look at these values. Okay, we have static ones, so this is perfect. Let's actually take all the static ones first and check those out before we proceed any further. And we're gonna try to write to it because not all values over here can be written to. It takes a long time, but okay, here we go, we found it. And as you can see, all these values are based on this one over here. So if you try to, for example, now write to this other one, minus 89, it won't work. The game won't even try to change it. But if we write to this one, minus 89, we're gonna look up. So let's actually call this pitch. And in the previous video, I showed you guys that, for example, the XYZ coordinates are grouped together. So my prediction would be that the yaw, pitch, and roll would be, they would be also together. So let's actually copy this address over here. Now let's add 4 to it. Change this to float. It's minus 17. And as you can see, this is our yaw. Next, let's add 4 once again. And let's change this to 50. And as you can see, this is the roll. If you guys don't know how to add hexadecimal, I don't know myself. I just knew this simple calculation. You just go to your calculator and you change it to programmer mode and you go to hexadecimal. Now the next thing that we're gonna need to do, we're gonna need to find our crosshair ID. So now to find the crosshair ID is pretty simple. You need to scan, it's a 4-byte, and we need to scan for an unknown initial value because we're not sure if it starts with 0. This game is a little bit unpredictable. And then we're just gonna look on our enemy, and then we're just gonna search for an unchanged value. Now I'm gonna look back again, down, and I'm gonna search for change value once again. Now I'm gonna search for an unchanged value. I'm gonna do the same thing while I'm moving, and while jumping, and while changing my guns, because there's a lot of variables like that are dependent on your movement, on your team, and stuff like that. So we just need to pinpoint the right one. Okay. Now let's look at the enemy actually, and let's look back at the floor, and now we're gonna search once again for an unchanged value. And over here we're gonna have 400,000. And now let's look on enemy and search for a changed value. 100,000 now for an unchanged value. Now the crosshair ID is part of your local player class. So actually, let me actually get the address of my local player class. So it'll be a 4-byte. And this is the address of our local player class. So let's actually search for that exact address. 224. This is not it. This is too far away from it. This is the closest over here. So I'm actually gonna take this one first and try if this is the one actually. So let's actually see what axis is. So we actually just get the offset real quick. Okay, so it's 190. Over here, R14 is going to be our local player address. So now if we go to our local player class and we're gonna add 1090, we're gonna get this value. So now if we look at the entity, we're gonna get 260. And now let's actually get into the coding. Hello and welcome to the coding part. As you can see, I'm in the previous video's project of the ESP. I did a few changes, I fixed a few things of the ESP, but that does not matter. First, let's actually create our triggerbot function. Let's do it up here. And let's actually create a thread for this triggerbot so it actually runs separate from our main thread. We're gonna detach it because we don't want the extra things that comes with this function over here. Also saves memory. Okay. Now the next thing we're gonna have to do, let's actually delete the structure vec for the vector 3 over here. I'm just gonna cut it because we're gonna make a better and improved one. Paste the old one here, and we're gonna have to do a few things. We're gonna have to overload some operators so we can actually play around with our view angles. Okay, after this, we're gonna have to create two functions that will help us. And by the way, I want to give the credit for giving me the inspiration to create this video for the YouTuber of the name Kaz. He's a very, very good YouTuber. He explains it much more better than me, and he's very well experienced. So please watch his video about it. I'm just trying to make a little different thing, and mainly on these videos I focus on how to memory scan because I had a very hard time in the beginning while I tried to get my offsets. The first function, it's gonna be the function that gets our angles basically. Which will basically do all the calculations that I showed you in the beginning of the video. The second function will be, it's for a check. It's for a validation check of our final angles that we found. And basically the check will be if our angles aren't 0, then we're gonna do the trigger bot. Okay, as you can see, I'm done. You guys can take a look at all of the vector free structure. Here it is. Next, we're gonna have to create a function which basically subtracts the enemy's coordinates with our coordinates, so we actually get the directional vector, and then calculates all those angles using this function over here, get angles. And then we subtract it with our view angles, so we actually get the deviation. Okay, now let's actually get into the trigger bot. First, gonna create the. I'm gonna write, and then I'm gonna explain you guys what exactly I'm doing. Okay, as you can see, we're done with the trigger bot, except that we actually have to do our shooting, and I'll show you how you can get the force attack. But first, let's actually go through our trigger bot code. So as you can see, everything is in a while loop. This is the main loop for our triggerbot. We're gonna sleep our thread, our triggerbot thread, so we don't consume all the memory, too much memory. We're then gonna get our local player by reading from our client.dll our local player class offset. We're gonna get our crosshair, local team, local health. We're then gonna get our view angle values from the viewAngles offsets that we found, and then we're gonna put all of these floats inside one vector free called viewAngles. Then we're gonna create our FOV, which if you guys want to change your FOV, you're gonna change it from here. You're then gonna create a variable angle, which is going to be empty for now. It's going to be a vector free. We're then gonna loop for all entity lists using this for loop. We're gonna get our entity, our team, our health. We're then gonna do these checks. If our local player is not present, then we're gonna continue. If our team equals with, if the entity team equals with the local team, then we continue. If our local health is equal or smaller than 0 or higher than 100, same with the entity, we continue. Then we get our position, our head position, the entity head position. We put them in a vector free. We're then gonna calculate the angle using the calculate angles function that we made, and then we're gonna get the FOV of that player, which is basically just the hypotenuse of the calculated angle X and the calculated angle Y. And then this is very important. If our calculated FOV is smaller than our FOV that we created, so the calculated FOV needs to be smaller than our FOV that we set, we're then going to send the our angle variable that was empty to the calculated angle, and then we're going to check if our angle is 0. So if our calculated angle isn't 0, so that means if our calculated angle is valid, then we're gonna do this check, which checks if our crosshair isn't -1, and -1 is the value when you look at the floor or the world around us. It's when you don't look at an entity. If you want to find out the value for your crosshair ID, you just have to print it in your console while you in game you're looking at the floor. And then here we're gonna just do our shooting. So now I'll show you how you can get the force attack. Okay, so now to find the force attack, we're gonna need to search for an unknown initial value. And then we are gonna have to write +attack in console. And then now we're gonna have to search for a changed value. It will take some time because CS2 is such a very large, it's a large game. Okay. Now we're gonna write -attack. Now we're gonna search again for a changed value. Now we're gonna search for unchanged values. Yeah, 4,000. I got 1,400. And now, let me just first off tell you, the force attack is not part of your local player class. Not at all. Let's actually scroll down and check out if we have any static addresses. And we do have some static addresses. So let's actually take all of them, all the client.dlls. And as you can see, let's try change the value of this one. Doesn't do anything, it does not work. Next, this one I saw that was 256. You can't even change it. Yeah, it is 256. This one was 65537. And as you can see, it works. And the offset, this is the offset over here, just copy it. You guys put it inside your offsets. And also guys, remember to actually put all of your found offsets inside this namespace and make one. Okay, as you can see, I did here a little mistake. It should be local player. Very sorry about that. That's why it didn't work. Now, before we test this, we actually have to write our logic. Now, let's actually try this. Let's actually build our program. And we're just gonna run it. Now we're gonna open our game, put our overlay on top, and now you can see the triggerbot works flawlessly. This is not me shooting. And as you can see, it works very nicely. The more FOV you activate, the more FOV, the more it's gonna shoot in other limbs. Like for example, I put 25 FOV, so it's gonna shoot on the feet as well, like an actual trigger bot. Thank you guys for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.